that as we look at our text for today from the Gospel of Mark, I think this might be the point where Jesus is in our story, right? We've been following Jesus in this narrative of Mark for the past few weeks. You see, we see in our text for today that Jesus is telling his disciples that it is time to get away and to take a rest for even just a few moments. So Jesus, perhaps, was also overstimulated in our story. Well, let's hear our text to see if we can parse out that idea from what we hear from Mark. So this is the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, verses 30 through 34, and then we'll jump down to verses 53 through 56. So hear the word of the Lord. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place to get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout the whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went into villages, towns, or countrysides, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So as I alluded to last week, if you recall, at the start of our text for today, Mark reported the regathering of Jesus' apostles from a successful mission after depicting the death and the burial of John the Baptist. So we have to think, as John's mission came to an end, the apostles' mission had just begun. And with their return, Jesus' immediate reaction was to secure a private place for his disciples to rest. You see, the journey had been fruitful for sure. They had done great works and marvelous things, but they needed a respite from their labors. The wilderness, which we saw provide a place of relief for Jesus earlier, seemed like a logical choice for them to go and to find rest as well. See, this is the place of rest and restoration and throughout the Markan narrative, this wilderness. But also this is a location that is on the periphery, right? Or on the outskirts of the commonly tread ground. So locating a place to eat leisurely seemed to be increasingly difficult for Jesus and his disciples because of the following that Jesus had amassed, right? Everywhere he taught, people gathered in large amounts. And we see this reference to food, that expresses how Jesus' mission was directly tied to economic realities of that day. See, food and eating are the two predominant themes of the narrative of Mark, and they receive specific attention in the two feeding narratives, if we recall those. And while the success of Jesus' apostles loomed large for the future of the mission, the death of John the Baptist that we talked about last week at the hands of Herodias loomed even larger. See, the mission may not be completely defeated, but drastic precautions would be a part and parcel of this operation that is about to take place. So see, the message, I think, was rather clear. Do not expect to take on the ruling authorities and not suffer the consequences. See, that was the message for the Markan community that they were trying to get across, and that was the warning for all really future followers as well as for us today. But I think perhaps what I find key in this passage that we heard for today is Jesus' need to find a place for his disciples and himself to rest away from the crowd, if even just for a moment. Right, after what could be assumed as a very long and arduous journey by the disciples and many powerful moments of preaching and teaching by Jesus, Jesus did what all great leaders do. He recognized the needs of his disciples. We have to imagine that they were physically exhausted from the journey, and Jesus was able to pick up on that and remind them that it was time to take a rest for just a bit. You know, even the best laid plans of Jesus in this case could not stop the pursuit of the crowd coming after Jesus and his disciples. So boarding the boat and arriving at their destination, they immediately noticed the crowd began to gather once more. Couldn't seem to get away. You see, our text says that Jesus had compassion on them, though, and he began to teach to the gathered crowd. Friends, this is where I have to take a minute, and I have to admit that I am definitely reading the characteristic of being overstimulated into the person of Jesus. You see, it isn't really explicit in our text that Jesus was the one that was in need of a rest. You see, in trying to put myself in his shoes, I know that I would not be able to handle the constant barrage of people and always having to be